This happened in college. At the time, I was 18 and a sophomore. I had just recently gotten out of a 6-year relationship and was starting to get into the dating scene. I downloaded Tinder and got to swiping. Some background, I didn't want to talk to someone that went to my university because thinking about running into someone I was talking to out of the wild really made me anxious. I ended up matching with this guy. We'll call him Marco. Marco was 20 and a junior at the neighboring university, about 15 minutes up the road. He had one selfie and the other 2 pictures he had were group photos, and they seemed older but didn't think much of it. We started chatting and very quickly he asked for my phone number. I would say it's a little too early for that, but he kept insisting and I eventually gave in. After about 2 days of talking, he started to ask for pictures, so I would send selfies. He would ask for more provocative pictures, and I kept shutting it down, telling him I wasn't interested in that and I just wanted to see where things went. Marco would say how he couldn't wait to see me, so he could kiss me, and every time he would say that I changed the subject. We planned a date after a week of talking. He said that he knew a good Indian restaurant over by his school, and then we could walk into the downtown area after. I agreed, as it would be in a public place. The day came for the date, and again I started to get a weird feeling. I told my roommate what we had planned, and she said she would keep her phone on her if I needed her. A few hours before the date, I got cold feet and told him my car wouldn't start and asked to reschedule. He offered to pick me up and I kept telling him no and that we should reschedule, but he kept insisting and started to make me feel guilty. He would say how he was looking forward to it for the past few days and I was hurting his feelings and that he would be more than willing to get me, but I'm not giving him that chance. Well, I caved and it was the worst decision ever. Despite the feelings I was having, I told him the information to come and get me outside of my dorm. Right when I got into the car, I realized that this was probably going to be a horrible date. Right away, he tried to hold my hand and asked to give me a kiss. I denied and he started to drive off. On the way to our destination, he drops that we are no longer going to the restaurant and that we were going to his apartment instead, and he was going to cook me dinner. At that point, my heart sank and I started to have a small panic attack. I texted my roommates letting her know. She was worried and said that she would come and get me if I needed. Again, not listening to my gut, I tell her that it's fine and we get to his place. When I say this apartment was disgusting, I mean it was covered in trash, dirty clothes, and dishes. He said that we had to go into his small room because his roommate was home and he didn't like it when he had company. His bedroom was even worse than the common area. There was only a single path to the bed and to the bathroom. It was so dirty. We sat in his bed and he turned on a movie. I can't remember the movie. All I remember is the stench of the room and him starting to make advances on me. Marco started rubbing my back and shoulders. I kept scooting away, trying to put some distance between us, but it didn't work. After a few minutes, he started to force himself onto me. He started to kiss me hard and holding my hand so that I couldn't move. I don't know how, but he eventually was on top of me, forcing his entire body weight on me, and I just couldn't move an inch. I was paralyzed by fear. He doesn't get much further than that, because as soon as he's on me, he's just as quickly off and running to his restroom, and he's throwing up. I have never been so thankful for vomit. I don't know why he got sick. When he came out, he apologized to getting sick, that it happens all the time, and says he needs to take me home. Trembling, I just get up, straighten myself, and follow him out. I still don't know if he's going to try anything else, and I didn't want to aggravate him or say anything wrong. So I try to act like nothing was wrong to get home safely, and that happens. He pulls up to my building, tells me that he wants to make it up to me, and I just nod and say goodnight and get out of the car. Once inside, I blocked him, reported him on Tinder, and deleted the app. I also took extra measures to block him on any social media I could. I didn't tell anyone at first what happened. I was embarrassed because I put myself in that position. I started getting calls from random numbers, and when I answered, there wouldn't be anyone else on the other line. I would block the number and a new one would be calling. It got to the point where my phone was ringing constantly. After the phone calls were random Facebook and Instagram messages from different accounts. They would say things like, "Why are you ignoring me? Why aren't you talking to me?" And then they started getting more aggressive and threatening. My roommate started getting messages and I had to tell her everything. She told me I needed to report him, or at least tell my parents. I didn't do either because I was scared. That is, until I started receiving random pictures of myself. I would be walking on campus, in the dining hall, in class. Then I got one of me in my dorm room. It was taken through my window, which was on the second floor. However, the main street was a hill that was the same level as my window, and that is what my room faced, and my bed was in front of that window. I told my roommate and she made me tell our RA. The RA was very concerned and ended up calling the campus police. I made a report with them. The messages continued and so did the photos until one day, about a week later, he approached me on campus. He grabbed me by the arm and tried to take me to his car. I started to yell and luckily there was campus police nearby. He was arrested and was banned from my campus and I didn't hear from him again. This was in 2014. So some of my memories aren't as vivid as I have tried to block this part out of my past. Not many people know that this happened to me. To this day, my family doesn't know. The only people that know are my college roommate, the RA, the campus police, my therapist, and as of the other night, my fiance. I want to spread awareness of the dangers of online dating. Always trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Not all online dating has consequences. I met my now fiance a few years later on Facebook dating. But your gut is usually right, and sometimes it's crucial to listen to it. With that being said, Marco, let's never meet again. So it started about October or somewhere in November. I noticed that my wing mirror on my car had been put inwards. I park a street away from my house, so I have a short walk to my house. My house is on a main road with one drive, and my parents park on that driveway. I asked my mother if this was her, as it was a thoughtful thing to do. She refused it was her, and my father also said it wasn't him. So I thought it was a kind soul, or perhaps a thoughtful person. After all, where I park has a lot of older people, and they always say good morning to me when I set off to work. This continues for the months onwards. It has only recently stopped since parking away from that side street. I asked an older couple of people on that street, and they said it wasn't them either. At this point, I only wanted to say thank you. So I continued going to work and didn't notice anything else until the winter weather got worse. December of 2023 was when the weirdness continued. The frost kicked in and the snow started on occasions. Since I set off from work at 7 a.m., it can be frosty at that time, and I would need to de-ice my car. About mid-December, I remember running late for work. It was 7:15 in the morning, and I still had not de-iced my car. So I was doing a careful rush to my car as it was very cold and icy, only to get there and see it had been de-iced for me. I was confused, and a little happy but also shaken. It was a strange feeling. Again, I asked my parents and anyone I saw on the side street. It wasn't any of them. My mom laughed and said you might have a secret admirer. Well, it's like she was a fortune teller. The de-icing of my car happened a few more times on those very icy days. From January onwards is when it got strange to the point I started parking elsewhere. About the end of January, start of February 2024, I saw what I can only describe as the homemade food left on top of my car. Don't worry, I didn't eat anything. I ended up throwing these away once I got to work, but I found the situation was getting beyond strange. Around the same time, the first letter or note was left. It was written in what I could describe as doctor handwriting. It was basically asking if I enjoyed being treated like, and I quote, the princess I deserve to be treated like. I brought this home and showed my parents, and they didn't like this at all. My dad said he was going to start parking on the street, and I can park on the driveway for a while. I said that would be a good idea, however, if this person was looking for my car, then he would know which house was mine. My dad agreed, but also pointed out that he or she may have already been watching me and may actually already know where I live. He stated the main thing was me walking home from my car to my house at 8:15 p.m. I worked 12 shifts. He stated he would sort the situation out if anything happened. I questioned possibly going to the police, and he stated that they would laugh at us without any proof. He was right, we didn't have anything. I didn't like the idea of parking back on the street, so I didn't. It's now April. I stopped parking on the drive a few weeks ago, and now I've started parking on a different street, still close to my house. Now nothing has happened since February, and I hope it doesn't, as it was starting to get worse. Do I have a stalker? Or someone just trying to fuck with me? Right off the bat, I'd like to say that this incident is one of few that have truly stuck with me. Although this took place in January of the previous year, it definitely keeps me awake at night. It seems surreal to me that so many weird things happen to people on a daily basis, and I'd never imagined them happening to me either. Anyway, I was staying abroad due to college, and there wasn't a single thing that had irked me or creeped me out. I lived in a relatively populated area. There were a lot of young women in my apartment, and even older women. So you could say I felt safe in my own home. Walking the streets was also safe, since there were always people around. There were apartments, parks, houses, those full-time 7-Elevens and small cafes. I'm pretty sure there was a small motel as well. Regardless, it creates a pretty decent image of the area. Although the university taught me the lessons in English for all the foreign students, I still wanted to learn the language to respect and experience the culture. It was fun, and I made quite a few friends in those classes. Well, one day I was walking to a convenience store from the class. I remember being quite dazed and tired. It was around 8 p.m. The class ended a while back, but since I had the once-in-a-lifetime leisure time, I decided to explore the place. I knew my way around, and I was feeling pretty confident about the routes and all. As time passed, I walked and reached this giant road with some empty plots to the right. Don't get me wrong, it was a residential area, and I could even hear noises from a couple of houses. Now, this is where it's a little weird. There's a bunch of houses, but as you keep walking towards the city and all the hustle bustle, there is this entire secluded area of just road and streetlights. The convenience store was like 4 kilometers away, approximately. I was feeling uncomfortable and very nervous as well, because of a previous incident I had. So I decided to stop and look around. There was nothing, but I decided to start jogging further, while looking side to side and back a little too. Not even 30 seconds passed, and I bumped into someone. I felt a feeling of dread rush over me, and my hair just stood up. My palms started shaking, and I didn't even lift my head up to see who it was. I apologized like crazy, simultaneously backing away and getting ready to fucking bolt out of there, like I was in the damn Olympics or something. The person came in front of me, started walking towards me in little steps, and started moving in this weird swaying motion. It was almost like a cartoon, and while swaying, the person just said, "What the fuck? What are you? Are you okay?" with this arrogant tone. I say person because I genuinely couldn't tell if this person was a man or a woman. Their face was covered by a mask, and they wore a large hoodie with sweatpants. The voice was sort of muffled but didn't sound masculine or feminine. The person started swearing and doing the weird swaying motion while reaching in their pants socket. I saw a glimpse of something shiny, and my instincts, that so conveniently died out, kicked in. I took the chance and fled the damn place. I went to the store and told the clerk. They called the police, who found 2 fucking shoes on the same spot. Along with the shoes was the mask, apparently. I never found out who it was, what they wanted, or how. I never saw them looking around in the empty plots. There were no bushes, and the light wasn't that scarce either. But I'm glad I'm safe. Although this happened a year ago, I still feel like I'm not completely safe. I don't know if it's paranoia or something, but I've been having a bad feeling since the beginning of this month. Even if I'm with other people or at home with my boyfriend, I feel like I have no privacy. Does anyone know what to do? So this happened about 5 years ago, and it still creeps me out. I was 18 at the time, and now I'm 23. I was walking home from work at this local pizza joint, and took my usual route home. It was about 9:45 to 10:15 at night, and it was super dark. As I'm getting about 100 yards away from the street I live on, a white van turns onto that street. Nothing suspicious, but something didn't sit right with me. So I yanked out my earbuds and paused my music. I then turned down my street, and as I'm getting closer to my house, I started getting a weird gut feeling. I looked up from my phone, and I was about to text my roommate, who was out of town at the time, that I was almost home. About 15 yards or so, as I look up, I notice the white van sitting in front of my house, and the man inside is just staring at me, the yellow car lights shining in his face. He had brown hair, glasses, and facial hair. His van lights were off, but his car was running. I stopped and put my back into a tree in my neighbor's yard, and I just stood there, maintaining eye contact with this man. After about what seemed like an eternity, probably like 5 minutes minimum, he starts driving towards the stop sign at the end of the road. I didn't put my back to him. I kept my back to the tree and maintained visual on the van the entire time until it stopped at the stop sign. He just sat there for probably 2 or 3 minutes, all while I'm not looking away and my back still on that tree. Finally, he turned right, the direction in which I had come from, and after about 20 seconds of making sure he or anybody else wasn't coming, I bolt to my house. I quickly get inside and lock the door. I go to the window and very quietly look through the blinds. I didn't turn on any lights because I'm not stupid. After a few seconds of looking, he drove back up and down the street and left again. Afterwards, I texted my roommate what happened, and then went to each and every one of the windows in my house to make sure they were locked, along with the back door and the garage door. I made sure to keep all lights off for the remainder of the night. I didn't sleep a tick that night. I was so paranoid at every sound or movement. Let's just say I never walked home after that. To the man in the van, let's never meet again. This is a story that pops back up in my head from time to time. I've only just told it to a few people, but I definitely feel like it deserves its place in here. It's for sure one of the scariest moments I've ever had as a child. Back when I was around 10 years old, my mom finally decided that it was time for her to start taking her driver's license. When she began taking lessons, she was struggling a lot. For that reason, my dad decided that he wanted to do some practice with her besides the official driving lessons with her instructor, just to make sure that she'd pass the upcoming test first try. My little brother and I were attending swimming lessons at this nearby university at the time. Behind a forested area near the university lays this huge student parking area surrounded by trees, which turned out to be basically empty every weekend. My dad saw the opportunity to take my mom here to drive around for a bit, and brought my little brother and I with them since we were too young to stay home alone. We brought a football with us. When we arrived to the parking lot, later on in the morning my parents began their practice. My little brother and I quickly got bored though, and asked if we could go over to this little grass field on the side of the parking lot to play some football. My parents let us since they'd always be able to keep their eyes on us whilst driving around. After playing for some time, my parents ended up driving around in the other end of the parking lot. They were approximately 300 or 400 meters away from my brother and I. Suddenly, this white Toyota pulls up into the parking lot. We were playing almost right at the exit or entrance. The car turns around and stops on my right side, with the vehicle facing the exit. The driver rolls down his window and presents himself as Thomas. He looked friendly, was good looking and young. A guess would be around 30. This is where things started to get weird. On the passenger seat was a woman covering her face with a newspaper. All I could see was long blonde hair, and on the back seat was a baby sat in the baby chair. Thomas immediately states that he's from the police, and that we have to get in the car immediately as he has to talk to us. My brother actually took 2 steps towards the vehicle, but I stuck my arm in front of his chest as I was sensing something was off. The woman was still covering her face at this point, not saying a word. Thomas then raised his voice and told us once again to get in the car or else he'd have to come out and get us. My brother and I froze out of fear. Suddenly, the woman put down the newspaper, showed her face and told us in the most calm, motherly voice to just listen to the man. The woman looked young, pretty, and like a person who wouldn't hurt a fly. At this moment, I began screaming as loud as I could. What we hadn't seen at this point was that my dad was already running as fast as he could towards us. He was coming from behind the vehicle, so we didn't see it. My parents didn't have time to drive us, since the road down the parking lot was twisted all the way. When my dad heard my scream, he started yelling as loud as he could. As soon as Thomas heard my dad and realized my brother and I weren't alone, he threw his car into the gear and took off as fast as he could. He most definitely looked like a person who shit himself when he saw my dad. My dad was furious and told my brother and I to hurry up back to the car. He didn't even think about calling the police at that point. He wanted to beat the guy up himself. That resulted in us driving around for the next hour trying to find him before my dad cooled down and decided that he should probably just call the police. We never found out who these people were, but this episode taught me to never judge a book by its cover. People can be the most friendly looking people in the world and still wish evil upon you or the ones you love. I'm not sure what these people would have done to us. I am sure though that one thing, they definitely weren't from the police.